Hey everyone, this is smpratte, and today we're going to talk about are grading companies controlling the pop report. This is a very juicy topic, so get the popcorn ready. I'm not only going to give you my opinion, I'm also going to talk about some of the current theories in relation to do grading companies control the pop. The pop report is a very useful tool. It is the total amount of cards graded. Every single graded card has a unique cert number and or barcode you can look up in the pop report. And recently, some people have looked at it and wondered, are they being more strict with certain cards? Are they being more lenient with others? And overall, I think there is definitely more market awareness, including within grading companies. So we should probably ask, what would be the incentive for a grading company to control the pop? And in my opinion, I think a company with more market share has the incentive to be more strict, and a company with less market share has the incentive to be less strict. And I think we saw this play out in real time with the one-of-one Magic the Gathering Lord of the Rings card. When that was confirmed, pulled, Beckett was shouting, trying to get that thing in. Like they were offering $1,000 gift card, free round trip, and they showed the card in a black label in their advertising without even seeing it in person. And then, of course, they got giga chatted by PSA and got a PSA 9. But in all seriousness, I think this really showcases where the incentive lies in each company. One that has more market share has the incentive to be more strict, and one with less market share has the incentive to be less strict and try to create as much buzz as they can. Now, if we're going to try to figure out and get into why is PSA more strict, this is where we hit the crossroads in the video of, do we go further into the conspiracy forest, or do we try to explain this as rationally as possible? I think if you think of grading as baking, every weekend when I'm doing weekend waffles in the grandma house, I'm using 2 cups of flour, and that's how most cards are graded when they come through. It's following that same recipe of 2 cups of flour. However, when a first edition based Charizard appears, all of a sudden it's like Great British Bake Off. I'm calculating every little white dot to make sure my recipe is as accurate as possible because I don't want a soggy bottom. And I think that's probably the easiest way to understand not only how a company might be more strict, but also how awareness plays a role into modern grading. Because technically they're following the same recipe and standard, it's just with more notable cards, they might get more critical evaluation. So you might be still asking, why is this happening? Why would a company really care? Why would they need to be more strict? And the ultimate answer is the grade guarantee. So quick history lesson, if we go back about 10 years ago, every single Pokemon card was going through bulk service. I remember submitting an illustrator through walkthrough, and I was probably the only human on the planet to ever submit a Pokemon card through walkthrough service because everything went through bulk. Gold stars, shiny cards, first edition base cards, some of them even declared $1. True story. And because of this, you had some misgrades. So when that happened, they had to do payouts. They got a notification like, hey, all these cards are going through bulk. So how do we disincentivize people to do that? And from that, the lovely chargebacks were born. And in case sarcasm is a foreign language to you, by lovely, I mean the exact opposite. I do not like chargebacks at all. Side tangent, I think they are just a way to make the customer pay insurance for a company just not doing their job. I could go on a long-winded tangent of numerous examples, but I'll save that for Patreon. But nonetheless, chargebacks now are a thing. And in fact, I would draw the line in the sand from when you had this awareness come into play around that time with chargebacks. Because naturally, what's going on there is a company has to reevaluate and say, hey, we got to look up this card and confirm its value. Hey, I recognize this card from the others in the pile. It's like those old cartoons, the thing that's not grayed out. That's your Charizard, that's your Gold Star, that's your Mario Pikachu, that's your trophy card, etc. So now a company has to look at it and say, okay, let's look up the market value. What's the current going rate? We have to charge whatever fee for that. And that is how it exists today. But again, the takeaway from all this is how awareness affects grading. And more importantly, it's why a company with more market share be more strict, because they're trying to maintain that standard because they offer this money back guarantee. And therefore, if there's like some hidden, scratch in there or, booger residue on your card that they missed, they don't want to have to pay out for that, especially when certain cards continue to have meteoric rises. So that's the breakdown for the more market share, more strict side of things. Now, if we hop the fence to the other companies who have less market share, and keep in mind, trading cards are crazy. I don't know another industry where one company has so much market share, maybe like planes or something like that. So when you hop the fence, you're dealing with companies that are trying to get just even 1% or 2% grabbing this, market share because it's such a crazy disparity. So naturally, that's going to create what? An incentive to be more noisy. And you see that in so many ways. Companies that get a illustrator that comes through, they shout it out, they collab it, they pin it, they bust out an article, they do a video, and I'm not trying to knock it. It's just showcasing the difference in incentives here. Where I sent plenty of prize cards to recently to PSA, got no kind of tag, got no kind of love, because more of that's happening over here. More importantly, these companies really want to let you know they got some of these big hitters coming through. And if you want to go deeper into this, I think another idea that comes to mind is why a lot of these non-PSA companies struggle with sub-9 grades is because they're so hyper-focused on that 9 to 10 range. So much so that some of them have even changed the entire grading scale. They're like, you know what? We're making 9, 5s, 10s. You heard it here first time ever. So again, this is more data to that point of less market share creates incentive to be less strict. If that's not enough, we can go even deeper into Beckett when they used to offer bccg. This is another time travel scenario where this was some type of, I don't even know what to call it. It was just an option to go through with grading, and it was always convoluted to me. And that's because everybody knew the bccg 10 was not even a BGS 10 or even a BGS 9. You know, I remember getting a Machamps bccg 10. This is a long time ago. And I'm like, oh, great, I can cross over to PSA. The second it arrived in the mail, I turned it over and look at the back of this Machamp. This thing's been through, like, it's like on Rocky IV right now. Like, this thing is so bruised and battle-torn, it's not even going to hit PSA 6. But the bottom line is that was a real service offered because they just wanted to slap a 10 on there. The psychology of 10, stonks, you know, everything, especially today, the line only goes up. That was that perspective back then. And then they ultimately phased it out because I think most people wised up to it and they're like, yeah, bccg 10 is clearly not a 10 in any other grading category. Like, I'll give a shout out to some really hole in the wall companies like KSA. I remember when I was crossing a lot of my hockey stuff from KSA back in the day, you'd expect like a -1 or 2 usually. So if I like, let's say a KSA 9, it would be a PSA 8 or something like that. But with bccg, it was like a minus question mark. Like, you had no idea what was going to happen. So the takeaway is this goes back to that idea of less market share. The incentive is to be less strict. So that's the general breakdown. And again, I'm just trying to do my best to capture what I think most people would agree is the current dichotomy as of recording this video. And keep in mind, I have no affiliation with any of these companies, just trying to keep it as honest as possible while also, again, not going into the conspiracy forest, because it's real easy to do that. Like, we've all had that experience where it's like, man, I feel like you're being brutal on this card. You know, I've been grading over 15 years now. I don't even know how many tens of thousands of cards. And there's certainly times where I'm like, you guys are really beating me up on this one, you know? So again, there's a lot of variances at play though. That grader that gave me this might have had a good lunch. That grader might not be there anymore. There's a lot going on here, but this is my best attempt to try and explain how a company with more market share might be more strict and companies with less market share might be less strict. And I think the final thing here to like soothe any wounds out there, because again, we've all been there where we've been disappointed in a submission or, you know, our pre-grades didn't add up to the final result. This is not applying to majority of cards. This is, I think, exclusive to like the very notable, like, let's go down the line. You know, we could say first edition base hollows, gold stars, prize cards, trophy cards, you know, the popular kids, you know, that stuff. Like, that's really what this is pertaining to. And ultimately, I would love to reverse entropy. I would love to go back, you know, when I'm talking about 10 years or whatever, and things were more just a collectible. But unfortunately today, things are a commodity. You know, since 2019, I've pontificated about this in the past before, we are now in a commodity market where this stuff, there's so much awareness that is not going to go away, that is not going to change. You can't reverse that entropy. Everybody and their dog is making videos. I'm barely making videos at this point because there's more important things going on in my life these days. And that's more to it, is that as we evolve, so does the hobby. And this is part of that evolution. It's not something that I want. I'm very against chargebacks. Not something I agree with. I've actually had some very strong disagreements. Again, I'll go into therapy and Patreon about it, but the bottom line is this is just the reality where we are. This is the stage of evolution we are in right now in the market. I don't think it's going to go away. More money equals more awareness. And I try to stay focused on the net positive that more people enjoy collectibles, Pokemon, etc. You know, that is the copium, I guess, that I am inhaling to deal with some of these, you know, these changes of awareness. But this is ultimately the landscape that we are in. And again, trying to ride that line, not to get too much in conspiracy, trying to break this down as accurately as possible with my baking analogy of how they're still sticking to the same formula. They're just counting every little white dot of flour and card damage. The analogy has layers to make sure, that it's as accurate as possible for those popular cards. I think that's probably the most reasonable way to say it. But ultimately, yeah, it does indicate that they probably are more focused. Those cards are getting more attention. But ultimately, again, this is not 90%. In fact, all these cards here in the nice popcorn in whatever back here display it's not going to have any effect on that. Like that, all that stuff back there, it'd be the same if it was great 10 years ago, 5 years ago, 10 years from now. It's all going to be the same. But yeah, for those more popular cards, I think these two dichotomies are definitely true. I think companies that have more market share can be more strict with them, and companies that have less market share can be less strict with them. And you have a better chance of getting a shout out too over here. And that might actually be a play, by the way. Just think about it in real time. Like that might be an angle if you're trying to boost your your reach online is to go with those other companies. They might give you a shout out. So anyway, there it is. That's everything I have. It's again a more controversial, juicy topic, but I tried to be as rational as possible as usual. But as always, guys, you know the deal. Let me know how I feel, and that's pretty much it. Till next time.